Today is December 19, and we start Luke chapter 19.
Thank you, Winston. So in Luke chapter 19, we have Jesus making his way to Jericho. And the crowds are gathering, right? They're building by the second to the point where it's standing room only. And you've got a man in the crowd who's a very rich man. He's the chief tax officer. What's his name?
Zacchaeus.
Yes, Zacchaeus. And Zacchaeus is despised by everybody. So as he's trying to make his way through the crowds to catch a glimpse of Jesus, nobody's budging. So he decides to climb up a tree. He sits up at top of this sycamore fig tree, and he looks down just to be able to see Jesus. Jesus is making his way through, and Jesus comes to a stop. And he looks up in the tree, and he says, Zacchaeus, he knows him by name, come down here now. My heart would have been racing. And he says, I am to stay at your place. And Zacchaeus makes his way down the tree, and he comes to Jesus, and he says, I am willing to sell everything I have, to give half of what is mine to the poor. I am willing to go to everybody I've ever stolen from and give them 4 times what I've taken from them. And Jesus, in that moment, what does he say? He says, salvation has come to this home today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. And then we go on to the parable of the 10 servants. You've got this noble man who's called to go off to another empire where he is going to be crowned king. And he leaves behind all of his belongings.
And the crown is a thorn crown.
Well, you're right. Yes, and we'll get to that in 1 second. You're exactly right, Winston. So as he leaves, he goes to his 10 servants and he says, I am entrusting to you this silver. Divide it up evenly and do right by it while I'm gone. And when this noble man returns, he goes to each of those servants. And out of accountability, he says to the first servant, what did you do with what I left you? And he says, look at this. I grew it by 10 times what you left. And he says, job well done. He goes to the next servant. And that servant says, look what you left me. I've grown it by 5 times. And he says, awesome work. He goes to the third servant. And he said, how about you? What have you done? And the servant says, I didn't do anything with it. I held on to it. What you gave me is still here. Here it is. I did nothing with it. And he says, shame on you. Because the purpose of this parable, there's a couple things. It's multiple. The first piece of it, you've got this nobleman who has to go to a foreign country, to a foreign empire, to be crowned, is Jesus. Jesus is making his way to Jerusalem, where he will be crowned in thorns, just like you said, Winston. And when he dies, he will come back in the second coming, or when we meet our Maker at the gates of heaven. And when that day comes that we breathe our last breath, we will be held accountable. What did we do with the blessings, the gifts, the talents that we've been given? Did we use them to help others? Did we share them with others? Did we use them to grow the kingdom? And if we did, God says that he can trust us with even more. But if we held on to those selfishly and we did nothing with them, then shame on us. We missed the entire purpose of what this life is about, what the gifts that we've been given are really all about. After that, we go into Jesus' triumphant return, or his entry, I should say. And as he's making his way in, he tells 2 of his disciples, hey, go further ahead and go into the town. And there will be a donkey that you will see, and that donkey's going to be tied up. Untie that donkey and bring him back. And if the owner of the donkey says, what are you doing? Say, this is for the Lord. Now this is amazing, because this fulfills the prophecy of what is said in the Old Testament. If we go back in the Old Testament and we go to the book of Zechariah and we go to chapter 9, verse 9, it says, rejoice, O people of Zion. Shout in triumph, O people of Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming to you. He is righteous and victorious, yet he is humble, riding on a donkey, riding on a donkey's colt. And now here we are, and Jesus is sending 2 of his disciples ahead to get that very donkey, in which he will end up riding into Jerusalem on. That is amazing. Now, some of the Pharisees are upset, and they sit there and they're arguing, and they're trying to tell the disciples to stop all this commotion, stop all of this praise and the hoopla that's taking place. And Jesus says, no, silly Pharisees, you can try to stop this, But this train is on the tracks and it's moving. You're not going to stop what's happening. Even the rocks will cheer, right? There's no stopping what's about to happen. This will be fulfilled. We go into Jesus weeping over Jerusalem. And most people, there's this celebration, so they don't understand, why is Jesus crying? But it's because Jesus understands what's going to happen, what has to happen. He is going to endure so much pain and suffering. So he's weeping for that reason. He's weeping because of the hardened hearts of Jerusalem. The Messiah's before them, but they don't even recognize it. Not only that, but Jerusalem has become so proud. They've become so arrogant that they can't even get out of their own way. And several decades later, what ends up happening?
Roman.
Yes, the Roman Emperor, Titus, will bring amongst Jerusalem so much pain and suffering. The walls will come crashing down. Millions of people will die. And they can't see it coming because they're too proud. They think they've got this life figured out. They're invincible. And Jesus weeps for those reasons as well. And we finish up 19 with Jesus clearing and cleansing the temple. He comes into town and he enters the temple. And he is blown away by what's taking place. People are selling things. They're bartering. It's turned into a place of business, a place of profit, a place where man can benefit. They're sacrificing things that really have no meaning, right? Sacrificing animals. That's not true sacrifice. They're not sacrificing anything that matters or means something to them. They're sacrificing the animals. And they're trading. And they're turning it into a business. And Jesus says what? My house is a house of prayer. My house is a house of worship. We enter this place with humility, on bended knees, recognizing that we are nothing without him. We need him for all things. And that is how we finish out 19 and get ready for 20 tomorrow.
All right.